Okay, so this next series of videos is on trigonometry, and we're going to start with a really quick review of things that you know from previous years in math. And so the first two things that you should know that we're going to use in this chapter are the 180-degree rule, which is that the sum of the three angles in any triangle is 180 degrees. And secondly, the other piece of information is Pythagorean theorem, that the sum of the squares of the legs of a right triangle is the square of the hypotenuse. So remember that in a right triangle, we have a right angle. This would be A, this would be B, and this would be C. So in this case, the hypotenuse is, the longest side is C, okay? All right, so types of angles that we've looked at. We just talked about a right angle in a right triangle. So a right angle is shown by a little square in the angle, and it means 90 degrees. And then in this triangle up here, I have two angles that are less than 90 degrees, and those are called acute, less than 90, and then of course obtuse, which are larger than 90 degrees, bigger than 90. And now perhaps two newer concepts, an angle of depression and an angle of inclination. So an angle of depression is from a straight line, a horizontal line, an angle down. So what could we be looking at here? This could perhaps be, say, a cliff, and out here there is a boat in the water, right? There's our boat, and this is the line of sight from the top of the cliff. Someone says lying down here and looking at that boat. This is the angle of depression. So we have to remember it's from that straight line, which is just a line in the air, downwards. Whereas the angle of inclination or elevation is the opposite. So if I imagine from here, and I am looking up at an airplane, say, this is from a horizontal line just again through the air upwards, and that is the angle of elevation in that triangle, which is right here. All right, and then if we're looking at how to label a triangle using the same letters, if I call this triangle A, B, C, I use the capital letters, A, B, and C for angles, okay? I can also use a series of three letters for an angle. So this here, angle B, could also be angle CBA, because it goes from C to B to A, right? So that's another way that you might see that labeled. And then I use lowercase a, lowercase b, lowercase c for the sides that are opposite, that correspond to those angles. So if this is side B, if I go across, if this is angle B and I go across, this is side B, this would be side C, and then lastly down here, side A. All right, so before we start on to the tangent ratio, I just have a couple of Pythagoras questions that I'd like you to maybe pause the video here and give these a try. Okay, so in each one we have a slightly different exercise that we're doing. Notice that here x is the hypotenuse. So here it's going to be 10 squared plus 12 squared is x squared. Whereas in this one, we're looking for a leg of the triangle. So this time is going to be x squared is going to be the hypotenuse minus the other leg. And so over here, x turns out to be 100 plus x squared, 100 plus 144. So I add those up and I take the root and that gets rid of this. And x turns out to be 15.6. So I hope you found that. That's a pretty easy one. That's something you've done in the past. Over here, x turns out to be 9. So the 9, 12, 15 triangle is what we call a Pythagorean triplet because it has nice whole numbers. And then over here, this one is an isosceles right triangle. So I have the sum of the two legs is, or sorry, the sum of the squares of the two legs is the square of the hypotenuse. So really I have 2x squareds is 625, and then I'm going to divide by 2, and I get 312.5, and then I'm going to take the root, and that turns out to be about 17.7. Okay, so this one, it looks like I didn't have enough information, but I really did. All right, and that is our quick review of what you learned in the past in Trig.